Well, hello everybody and welcome to the 15th IDS brought to you by IMI with the support of our partners Google, InMobi, and Facebook, Microsoft. In this session, it's a trialogue session titled Digital Transformation, Disruption and Growth. And it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Rohit Dosi, Director, Microsoft Advertising InMobi as the moderator, Mr. Nick Seckold, Vice President, APAC, Microsoft Advertising, and Mr. Tanmay Mohanty, Head of Global Partnerships, Publicis Media India, and Group CEO, Zenith India. With that, I hand over the proceedings to you, Mr. Rohit.
Thank you, Amita, for the introduction and setting the context. First of all, I think a really warm welcome to all of you, and I would also want to thank our panelists, Tanmay and Nick, for being on the panel. So super excited to have you both, on the panel. The topic for today's discussion, right, is something that we've seen happen in India and APAC and across the globe, right? And I think the pandemic has naturally accelerated it, right? So that brings me to the topic, which is digital transformation, disruption, and growth. I think most of us this past year, right, we have experienced what truly has been once in a lifetime experience, I would say, right? While a lot of folks, we have always spoken about digital disruption and transformation as buzzwords, but for many years now, probably, right? But I think nothing has made organizations rethink what digital truly means to them. And I think, since the onset of the pandemic. So I think be it from an operational perspective, people, culture, work from home, work-life balance, right? Reaching consumers beyond the physical space. It has been a year of tremendous change for all of us. And consumer behavior, I think, has evolved a lot, right? I think on ourselves on Microsoft Search Advertising, we have seen user search queries rise across verticals, and they have shown some really unique patterns, right? I think people are searching now more than ever for things they've never searched before. Hyperlocal queries have gone up by more than 500%. Delivery-related queries rose by 200%. And I think there are also a lot of newer verticals like e-learning, home and garden, wellness that have saw a significant jump in, during the pandemic. So I think to start, and my question to you, Tanmay, would be, as someone who sits in the CEO's chair, right? What's it been like? How are the first few weeks? What is the first initial scramble? I think I'm sure a lot went through in the first 3 to 4 weeks, right? So if you could share your experience on that with the audience out here.
Thanks, Rohit. Okay, if I just step back, and some of these trends have been, like you said, it is for multiple years. We have been hearing, but what COVID brought in, and that is there are 4 significant ways that we see the both our clients and audience reacted to this COVID. Okay, the first one is that the mode of distribution of media has changed completely. Whether you talk about live streaming, video on demand, you see like a 300% jump in most OTTs right now. This was pre-COVID to post-COVID, completely changed. The second thing has happened, and this is what I think most of my clients day-to-day deal with, is media has become very intelligent. Okay, whether you talk about contextual media, whether you talk about video intelligence that platforms like YouTube does or Facebook does, with the media, it has become very intelligent of what you want, and they are able to deliver. The third change that I think, which affects me more, is intelligent advertising. Agree? Whether you talk about dynamic creative, dynamic advertising, moment marketing, they all seems to be happening for 4 years, but COVID brought that into the force because products were not available in a lot of places, digital shopping went up, so automatically that got accelerated. And the last part, which is something I think India with 4G, you have 700 million people connectivity, specifically, you have experiential media came on. So look at how Geo expanded on that, or how AR, VR content has been getting it, how e-commerce expanded, not just the big ones like Amazon or Flipkart, but also the smaller like Zomato started delivery systems, or you spoke about education. Those experiential media engagements is what is really driving this change. So that is how I look at all these changes happening.
Sure. And could you also share, from your experience in terms of while there is a lot of, intelligent advertising, like you mentioned, right, with 700 people, in India already there, media has definitely become intelligent. But I think, for organizations to be able to adjust to that change immediately in such a short duration, right, I think that is something that, our audience would love to know about. So if you could, share your, experience on that front.
Okay, so just I know Nick is there and Nick will have a view on it, but I'm just saying, see, most clients at any given point right now, when you talk about digital transformation, they really think, how do I survive in a platform world? Because all these platforms, whether you talk about Google, Facebook, all these platforms have their own data, their own intelligence, their own advertising platforms, and all the clients think about, how do I survive across media, not just in platforms? And that is what is driving this change in transformation. Because digital transformation is not just about making marketing interesting. It is also to gear up your processes, gear your own team management, how you are looking at all of that. And that is what is, I think, not just India, APAC is seeing that similar type of growth. Nick, you agree with that?
I sure do. I mean, it's the similar trends all over the region, without a doubt. And I think, fortunately we sit in an organisation that is at the forefront of a lot of this digital transformation innovation, and that being Microsoft. And what we've seen is effectively 5 years worth of innovation happening within about 2 or 3 months, right across the world. So it doesn't matter what market you're in, whether you're emerged already or whether you're emerging. I think businesses around the world were forced to accelerate any of their transformation plans that they may have been thinking about but hadn't yet executed on. And the biggest challenge, I guess, most have faced is transitioning their workforce from an office environment to a work from home environment. And that throws up all sorts of challenges around remote working capabilities, connectivity at home, workspace environments. Are you set up to work from home? Are you co-inhabiting? Do you have the room, the space? And then, of course, privacy and security and all of those issues that, the whole organization needs to be thinking about, from marketing to IT to, legal and so on and so forth. So it's been a really, really interesting and disruptive sort of 8 or 9 months since the world was gripped by this terrible disease. But I think from a business perspective, is actually, I think many businesses will come out the other side, a lot better off, because they now have a new way of working, new processes, and they've really accelerated their innovation or their transformation journeys.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Tanmay and Nick. I think definitely align, to your viewpoint in terms of, even for bigger organizations, right? I think how sales was done or how operations and marketing was done, that has completely changed, right? I think all of us were used to having, in-person interactions, right? And now we are here, in a virtual setup, interacting with each other. So definitely a lot has changed. I think what the pandemic has also done is exposed like a lot of brands when it comes to digital marketing maturity and readiness, right? I think it has pushed everyone to kind of, do their best in terms of how they want to reach out to their customers, which are the messages that they want to kind of, create, which is the sort of image that they want to create with their customers itself, right? I think that brings me to the next phase of this discussion, and would love to know your thoughts on this. That consumer behavior has shifted rapidly in the last few months, right? I think which has also led to a lot of uncertainty in the CMO's office, I would say. And consumer point of sales have changed, right? I mean, effectively, consumers are still going through the journey. I would say it's still omni-channel, but I think they're now, the point of sales have changed. They're not now purchasing at different places, than they were before, right? And in terms of, I think, for the CMOs out there, I think it has been a lot on re-strategizing in terms of, how they want to kind of reach out to their customers, right? Any new normal consumer trends that you feel are here to stay, that you would want to share? Nick, you want to go first?
Look, I think the first thing to say here is that the behavior that we're seeing is not necessarily new. I think it's just heightened and accelerated. And then more and more people have been forced I guess, indoors through, government restrictions in lockdown, which is forced the behaviour of those who perhaps in the past may not have necessarily embraced online shopping, as an example, as a normal behaviour. So, online shopping is not new, not in India and not in Australia, not in the US, obviously, and so on. But, I think there's just more and more people now, considering that as a means to consumption. So, I think that the challenge that CMOs, I guess, are facing is, how do they reach these consumers? Where are they spending time? Digital is a fantastic medium across, all of the different platforms that we have access to, but it can get very fragmented very quickly. And really understanding, where dollars are being spent and what return are you getting for each of the dollars that you're spending across these platforms. And as Tanmay, mentioned earlier, ideal world is that you would be able to measure your marketing activity across platform. And we know that that's becoming more and more challenging as, the larger tech players are, putting up their walled gardens, so to speak, and really focusing on this issue around first-party data. We know the cookie or the third-party cookie is being deprecated by many browsers, many of the world's leading browsers, including Microsoft Edge. And that's forcing, brands and CMOs to kind of really think about what their first-party data strategy looks like. And are they building a one-to-one connection with their consumers? And if they are, how are they interacting with it, and how are they leveraging that asset that they should be building or should have been building for quite some time? But obviously now with what's happening in the industry, it's almost forcing, brands to really accelerate their plans in this area. So I think I don't see that consumer behavior has changed. I think it's just accelerated and forced those that, were once probably a little resistant, online more and more.
Yeah, I think those were some great insights, Nick. Definitely, with marketers, trying to reach out to their customers online and also trying to measure, and then data and privacy being in concern. Definitely, there is a lot going on in the CMO's office. Tanmay, as someone who like you, who kind of works with has worked with a lot of brands itself, right? Can you, from your perspective, share interesting insights in terms of how the change has happened for different verticals? I would say rather than I mean, there is definitely something that has changed, right? But can you share some insights from your experience in terms of how it has changed for different verticals?
Definitely. Okay. And I'll take that point because the trends that you are seeing, like Nick just brought in the whole discussion of real identity. The marketer has moved in from just a marketing or a brand management to a techno environment discussion all the time. And what has happened, and whether you look at clients like Nestle, GSK, or look at BFSI sector, some of my clients like HDFC Bank or Prudential ICC, there are 4 things that they are looking at to solve all of these CMOs. The first is, how do I have real identity of the customer? Because walled garden doesn't allow you to do that cohesively, number 1. Number 2, and specifically for BFSI, what has changed for them is moving from there to dynamic, diverse, disruptive, creative. Whether you look at HDFC doing those innovations that you see, or Pru going vernacular during the COVID period, that disruptive communication is the second thing they all grapple with. Okay. The third thing, and I know it's a discussion that how much digital really can deliver from a reach point of view, but smart media is the focus. That it's a scaled smart media. How do you, between walled gardens, between all technologies, how do you reach your people finally? And last thing, and we saw this during COVID, and I think Nick must have seen a lot of consumer related clients, like large global clients as well as local like Dabur and all of that, they moved in, even ITC moved into D2C business. Agree? What they're trying to build is a direct relation with consumer, because during pandemic, the loyalty, or you may call it disloyalty of the consumer went for what is available because the pantry behavior changed. when pantry behavior changes, brand loses, either gets loyalty or gets disloyalty. So all of these clients, they are every day struggling. How do I build a one-to-one relationship? So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I think completely aligned. I think on the bit on how brand loyalty has changed, and either it can kind of push loyalty or push consumers to not be loyal, right? With Indian audience specifically, right? I think we've seen in the past that a lot of audience which do online purchases is also very discounts heavy, and we see the purchase pattern really spike up or shoot up during the sale transactions, right? Nick, if you could share some of, from an APAC perspective, right? Unlike India, are there any trends, that has happened during this time while we kind of, as we get into the brand loyalty discussion, right? Anything, that over from an APAC perspective, what are the key audience behaviors that you've seen, happen across APAC and not just India?
I think the first thing to say is that consumers are moving rapidly across the web, across multiple devices. So, the conversations that we're having with CMOs is similar to what Tanmay had mentioned, is they're trying to figure out, how do they reach these consumers at scale and communicate with them in a way that encourages them to buy product, at the very core. That's not an easy thing. I mean, the pandemic has obviously accelerated that, but again, that's been a challenge that marketers have been facing for quite some time. And then if you think about the device mix, so a typical consumer across most markets in APAC and around the world will probably have 2 or 3 devices, depending on your socio-economic situation. You'll have a laptop for work, you might have a tablet at home that you browse on, and you've most definitely got a mobile device. And are those 3 devices connected through single ID? If you're interacting with brands, how do they know that it's the same user using different devices? And that's where the first party logged in data becomes imperative. And brands like ourselves, Microsoft has its intelligent audience graph, and a number of our competitors have built really intelligent audience graphs that allow them to differentiate between devices to make sure that they are providing one user ID, I guess, across multiple devices. So, I think the trend really is that the movement across the web is alive and well, and it will continue to grow. The challenge for brands and marketers is how do they understand the journeys that consumers are on, which devices did they interact on, and then making sure that they put their marketing messages in front of those consumers at the right place at the right time in a contextual manner. Add in location on top of that, and the world gets a little bit more complicated. But it's a super cool opportunity, actually, because you can tell really interesting stories and build a connection and loyalty ultimately with consumers, providing your messaging at them in the right way and not hitting them too many times. Most marketers on this call will no doubt be familiar with reach and frequency. Frequency matters. Think about your own Facebook feed. If you are getting hit with advertising on a regular basis, and you're not interacting with it, and of course you're starting to kind of scroll straight through if you're on your media feed or what have you. So it's important that brands think about those more traditional media metrics in the context of digital, and really be smart about how they're interacting with consumers, for sure. So yeah, I think it's just fragmented, not going away, and what I'd encourage CMOs in the audience to really think about an omni-channel strategy. It's a word that's been used many times over a number of years, but now more than ever, it's super critical to think about how does all this interact. And depending on your marketing goal, if it's about awareness, that there are a number of platforms you use to achieve that goal, and it's not just television. People are spending time watching content for sure, but they're also interacting online at the same time. and often in social environments, talking about those programs with their friends and family, maybe around the world, maybe within country like India or what have you. So, it's not a one or the other strategy. It's about how do these channels work together and in a complement to drive the biggest impact for your marketing dollars.
Sure. Yeah, I think completely aligned, Nick. I think from a technological perspective, there have been a lot of advancements that have happened. And from a consumer standpoint, definitely a lot of, behavioral changes and kind of, aggressive movement towards a more technological framework has happened. How would that also kind of, calls for in terms of how a CMO or a marketer would be looking at let's say measuring impact or even skill sets of people required to kind of, let's say deliver, right? So any thoughts on Tanmay and Nick on, how have, let's say if I were to put it out in a way that a CMO has to measure the impact of, in terms of what's working or not, or probably, how the interaction of the marketing team along with or the sellers is happening with the clients, right? Does that anything from your experience in terms of how that have changed from an organization perspective?
Yeah, Rohit. So the two things, and this I'm talking about post-COVID. Some of these questions, and all of us know that some of these questions, all marketers talk about running analytical models or attribution models and all of that. We all have been living that, and given that India is a country where you don't have still a single panel between TV and digital, and measurement becomes a discussion point and more of an intellectual discussion than anything else. But what has happened post-COVID? See, when consumers move more toward commerce, what everybody thinks that it's a good way to sell. Okay, but what a lot of time we see globally, and this is something we ran across 27 countries worldwide. What we saw, the pack size differs. I'm just giving an example. Okay, when people buy in large packs now post-COVID because they want to store up, what happens in large pack? The margin starts dropping because you are not only discounting, but also margins are dropping, which doesn't allow a lot of time marketer to measure the way they used to measure in the retail world. That's the first thing. The second thing happening is that most of the time in a country like India, where you have 300 people got into digital 5 years back, and they are the digital natives, and you have every year adding 100 million, 150 million, and during COVID, you probably added 150 million more people. They all coming in vernacular. So what is happening for a client is that measurement is not against a dollar that you put in. It's about acquiring a client versus retaining a client. And most marketers have been thinking and looking at marketing as a whole to the ROI of the growth of the brand. Agree. But for most marketing is about acquiring a new customer, which has been the focus. But most marketers give up the thought of how do I retain my customers and get ROI out of that money, because I have already bought it. And we just spoke about loyalty and disloyalty during COVID period. It becomes imperative that marketers look at them differently and attribute those things differently rather than looking at how much growth I'm just looking at from one side of the marketing money. The second part, the tech or capex that you put in for all this digital disruption is not going to get you money back in 1 day or 1 month. Okay, it's a long-term process of marketing being intelligent. And most of the time, because that is, I think that is what we're discussing, CMOs now or CEOs now also depend on CIOs to take these decisions. Agree? And that is not a very transparent way of measuring spends that client thinks of investing on this. So marketer is looking at how do I put the infrastructure in place versus how much data I buy in or collect versus how much ROI I do in growth marketing in rich frequency and how much I do in acquisition. They need to be measured separately. For most of us keep on struggling with that every day.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great point, Tanmay. I think while we're thinking about spending and measuring ROI, but I think lifetime value of a consumer also comes in here and plays an important role, right? And I think that brings me to the next question. I think the need for trust from brands that the consumer is choosing, right? I think it has only strengthened, and I think we've seen a lot of change happening in the Indian ecosystem in terms of I myself actually I used to kind of go to several online websites to buy, but then have narrowed down my choice significantly. So I felt that change, and I'm sure that is happening around in the Indian ecosystem as well. I think also from a recent survey, Microsoft survey that we did, right? We I mean, the results were absolutely shocking, right? Where 85% of the consumers mentioned that they only, will consider a brand that they trust, right? So could you share a bit more on, marketing with purpose, and how trust, is going to be important going forward? Nick, you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rohit. That's a trend that's emerging. Has been emerging for a little while now, but there's a ton of research out there at the moment that talks exactly to your point, Rohit. Microsoft put some research out recently that looked at this, and essentially, consumers are looking for brands with a spine, so to speak, and who are socially active, and doing the right things, essentially. And that takes time. You can't just come out, and have a campaign and tell people to trust you. This is a sustained strategy that is built over, a number of years, and then results follow. So not all brands can do this, and not all advertisers are interested in building a sustained brand presence, and really building that loyalty over time. But certainly there are a number of brands out there that are kind of thinking about this at the moment. And when we think about the three pillars within the loyalty phase, you're thinking about responsibility. So brands that would respect my privacy, will protect my personal information, is open and honest about how my data is being used, supports ethical practices. The second one would be around values. It stands for what I believe in. So do I resonate? Do I understand the brand? And do I resonate with them? Are they proactively solving issues if the products or services don't deliver? So if you have a bad experience with a brand and you call customer service, how is your service, and did you result that you were looking for, or certainly an amicable solution? And do they deliver on the product?
I think
Therefore, consumers have a very short-term relationship. And then the final is around inclusion. Is the brand genuine and authentic? Is for someone like me? Do I resonate with that brand, and can I see myself using those products? So I think there's lots of different opportunities that brands can explore when they're thinking about marketing with purpose. But it's not just about advertising a product and it's one and done. You've got to think about, to your point, Rohit, around lifetime value, and can I build a relationship with this consumer over time? Because we know loyalty builds trust, and if consumers trust a brand, then they're more likely to come back and purchase on multiple occasions.
Sure. Yeah, I completely agree to that, Nick. I think trust is a culmination of responsibilities, values, and inclusion, like you mentioned. From an Indian landscape point of view, Tanmay, any examples of the brands that you see using these values already, or any shifts that have started to happen? Because I think there are a lot of larger brands, right, like Amazon or let's say a Paytm, etc., right? They're kind of trying to increase the touch points with the user, right? So probably they have multiple touch points with the same user in terms of different product offerings itself, right? And then there is definitely a subscription based model, right, where consumer the brands are kind of trying to keep the users hinged to them, right? So any interesting insights that you would want to share with the audience out here?
So post COVID, the communication, I know, so one of and I'm going to make a fun of it, but so you go to television and you see almost all advertisements start looking the same. That's because I think most advertisers understood that consumer is worried about their safety, health, security, and the trust in the brand. Okay, so they started modeling from one fear point or one concern, and they started building communication. Okay. And that is where the learning comes in. Look at how P&G or Nestle does that. The core messaging has not changed and it's still the same. But what also it has brought in emotions like sustainability of the planet, the carbon effect. I have seen clients now discussing how do I amplify that, because it's not just about safety and security. Safety and security is given by my brand. All of this clients agree. But what's more important is to look at a long-term perspective, and I think Nick was talking about it, is long-term perspective of what you want to build trust on. And that's where I brought in. Look at how brands just not looked at safety and security in a TV commercial or a digital commercial, but also in how they interact on different touch point with the client, with the customer, because that brings in to trust during this difficult periods. And it's not ending right now. It will take another year for all these things to settle down. And you have got an ample time for you to build long-term relation with the customer.
Sure. Yeah. I think for the audience who have joined us, any pro tips on in terms of how they should look about growth, probably any trends that you would want to share, from which are here to stay, let's say, in terms of if they were to look at growth in the next 2 to 3 years, any tips for the audience out here, Tanmay?
2-3 things, and I think we don't talk too much about it. See, digital disruption is not just a marketing role; it's an organizational role, because it changes everywhere. So most of the time we forget that how we look at our own resources to do the transformation internally, because it needs a thinking process change, not just at a marketing level, but at every level. And my view is that if we talk more internally and look at all global brands, look at whether it is DBS Bank, which is one of the client 4 years back, they globally took how digital transformation can bring into BFSI. Okay. And they changed the bank. These things doesn't happen just from top down. It happens at organizational level. So, and Nick will know, I think, not just clients, Publicis has been struggling with how to bring that up for last 2-3 years, that how do you bring creativity, technology, and media together. And we built with Microsoft our whole AI-based model of managing people, where we could manage time. It's called Marcel, and lot has been written about Marcel because we built it and we saw the effect. You won't believe, Rohit, during the COVID period, there are around 3,000 people just in APAC who we could redeploy in different parts, because different countries went through different stages of COVID and marketing got affected. Marcel allowed us to move people to the countries where it's needed, or the roles which needed, seamlessly. That shows the digital transformation more than just talking about. Agree? So it's about using technology to solve for the problem, both internally and externally. And that's what my thought is, that we mostly think about as marketing, but we don't think it as transforming everything.
Yeah. I think those were some great insights. I think the point that I really liked is, the thinking has to change, and probably, the way we look at technological development or the stack or marketing, probably in pieces. But I think, with the overall pandemic change, everything has to now come together and tie it up, for the betterment of, I think, the community and the consumers. Any tips for the audience here, Nick, from you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of the points that Tanmay made. I mean, I think it's not, you're not able to just transfer traditional media thinking into the digital world. I think there is a lot of opportunity for brands to think about how they best use technology to solve problems. To Tanmay's point. It's not just a matter of putting a TVC online, for example. I mean, a 30-second spot doesn't necessarily work in online video environments. People's consumption of those media channels is different. The intent is different. They don't necessarily sit down in front of, in their lounge room ready to watch content. They might be browsing through and and using it to kill time rather than actually, as a destination. So, understanding the channels, understanding consumers' behavior within those channels, and then leveraging those platforms to do the job that you're asking them to do. I think the other point that Tanmay made, which I agree with, is around sustainability. The piece that we've worked a lot on, Microsoft as the advertiser, is around accessibility as well. So, going back to the point around brands with purpose, it's thinking about product development for audiences that have long been ignored, or I guess not so much ignored, but not necessarily thought about in the product development phase. A great example of this is the Xbox controller, where the Xbox team in the US built a console that was accessible to disabled people. And it changed the game and allowed a lot of these consumers to come online and interact and play games with their able-bodied friends. So it's not just about marketing and the messages, and what you do in social environments. I think it's, if you are a brand who is manufacturing product or packaging, FMCG brands as an example, how is your packaging accessible for disabled people, for example? Can they open the packet? Can they open the can? Whatever it might be. So, it'd be interesting to explore those areas, and they're all interlinked, because those types of practices and giving options to that demographic of consumer, can then build the trust and loyalty, and therefore, the long-term value that a customer can bring to you.
Sure. Thanks for those insights, Nick. I think I think it was a great discussion, and I think that brings us to the end of the panel discussion. So thank you, Tanmay and Nick, for joining. I'll just kind of want to open the floor for audience for a few questions. We have a question. So I think one of the question that I have is, what should be the approach to leading digital transformation when it comes to FMCG brands? Tanmay, you want to take that?
Fair enough. Okay, so go back to the first point. I think it will little bit of preaching. See, most of the CPG brands have been about reach and frequency and at scale. Always the marketing has been built on that. But what has happened post-cookie world, that they all gearing up for real identity is the biggest thing they're sorting out. Okay, that whether how do I create platforms, how do I create service layers which can allow me to, through a value system, collect the first party data, because that is what I'll miss out in the world. That's the first thing. The second thing is, most advertisers, given the way COVID has happened and the impact of it, are worried about what communication at the right moment makes sense for my consumer. Okay, so you'll see exponential growth in dynamic creativity in the market. You will see a lot of data partners coming up in this market. Agree? The third thing, and we all saw this report come out sometime back, that in a year or so, TV AdX will be same as digital AdX in India. Agree? That means, how do I 50% of my ad budget, how do I get that to work better than what it was working? That's the third thing. The fourth thing, which is going to be always about commerce, how do I build my D2C channels? Because CPG brands, irrespectively of what they do, they still need to have a D2C strategy. And that has been Publicis' structure. That is how we are structuring ourselves also to answer those questions.
Yeah, I think you briefly also touched about on this before, that while brands are still now figuring out how to go directly to their consumers, right? And I think the way they do it is kind of going to matter in the times to come, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think just to add to that point, I think the reliance on third-party data providers is something that is going to become more challenging. So to Tanmay's point, brands, if they're not already, should absolutely be thinking about the relationship they have directly with consumers and building their own database, so they're not reliant on a third party to provide this intelligence.
Yeah, completely aligned on that, Nick. So I think one is building their own databases definitely helps it, right? And then as the technology becomes more and more advanced, I think that targeting will also come into play, and then that is going to be kind of really big in terms of are they reaching the consumers that they want or not. So I think that's the question to ask. But thank you, Tanmay and Nick for joining today. I think it was really great to have you on the panel, and I'm sure the audience out here might have found a lot of really useful insights. So thank you for your inputs.
Rohit and Nick, thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having us, and hope you have a great conference. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for that wonderful and engrossing session. With that, we come to the end of this Trialogue session. We'll meet you for the next sessions. Keep hanging on. Stay safe. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.